They said Japan finally had a female prime minister. And for one glorious second, every woman in the country thought, finally, someone who understands us. But then came the reality check. Takaichi Sanae isn't here to save women. She's here to prove to men that she never needed saving in the first place. In a country where single mothers work 3 jobs, where women still earn 75% of what men make, and where saying, I want a career is basically social suicide, Japan got a female leader who looks at all this and says, work harder, be patriotic, and smile. Yes, Takaichi graduated from Japan's elite political training machine, a system designed by men for men to produce women who never question men. It's like hiring a firefighter who hates water, or electing a vegan who campaigns for the meat industry. And yet, the headlines called it a new era for Japanese women, a symbol of empowerment. Really? Empowerment for whom? The corporate wives who already have maids and drivers? Or the factory women who still get groped on their morning train? Takaichi's Japan doesn't want equality. It wants obedience dressed in lipstick. It wants women who are ambitious, but only as long as that ambition serves the system. So today, let's talk about how a woman became the perfect tool of patriarchy by never fighting it. Let's talk about how Takaichi turned feminism into a political accessory, because sometimes the worst enemy of women is a woman who made peace with the men in charge. Once upon a time, Sanae Takaichi wasn't part of Japan's political elite. She was the outsider, the small-town girl who supposedly fought her way up in a man's world. That's the legend the media loves to recycle. But let's be honest, Japan doesn't let outsiders rise without permission, especially not women. So how did she do it? By playing the game better than the men who built it. Takaichi learned early that the secret to surviving Japanese politics isn't rebellion, it's imitation. She didn't storm the gates of patriarchy. She quietly asked for the keys, learned the password, and smiled her way inside. Her image became the perfect paradox, the strong female leader who never threatens male power. She talks tough on national security, worships the emperor, and quotes conservative ideology like a scripture. In short, she became the political comfort food of the Liberal Democratic Party, LDP. Familiar, obedient, slightly spicy, but never truly challenging. And that's why the men adored her, because she was their success story, proof that the system works, as long as you never question the system itself. They said, look, a woman in power, and Japan applauded itself for being modern. Meanwhile, Takaichi's rise said less about progress and more about how effectively Japan can turn even feminism into a product of patriarchy. She didn't break the glass ceiling, she just cleaned it so everyone could see their reflection better. Behind her smile is a lifetime of strategic silence. Silence about gender discrimination, silence about sexual harassment in politics, and silence about working women collapsing from overwork. Because the moment she speaks about those issues, she stops being one of the boys. And in Japan's male-dominated politics, being one of the boys is the only way a woman survives. Takaichi isn't a rebel, she's the system's favorite daughter. The girl who proved that in Japan you can rise to power as a woman as long as you never act like one. Takaichi calls herself a woman of conviction, which sounds noble, until you realize her convictions mostly serve men. She insists she's not a feminist. In fact, she wears that label like a badge of honor, as if rejecting feminism makes her more rational, more objective, more deserving of male approval. To her, feminism isn't liberation, it's a weakness, something noisy, Western, emotional, and dangerously modern. You know, everything the Japanese establishment fears. She once said that women should respect traditional values. Translation: stay quiet, stay loyal, and don't make men uncomfortable. In her worldview, equality is fine, as long as everyone stays in their assigned seats. And here's the irony. Takaichi benefits from every battle feminists before her fought: the right to education, employment, and political participation, all gifts from movements she pretends never existed. She climbed a ladder built by women she now calls too radical. That's the magic of her politics. She repackages male privilege in a kimono of politeness. It's soft power for a hard patriarchy. The LDP loves her because she neutralizes feminism while pretending to represent it. She's a shield against change. Proof that Japan doesn't need equality because, look, a woman made it to the top. Meanwhile, ordinary women still face the same nightmare: maternity discrimination, unpaid overtime, invisible glass walls. And when they protest, Takaichi calls it divisive. That's her brand of feminism, one that smiles while shutting doors, one that praises women for working hard in systems designed to crush them. It's the kind of feminism that gets invited to dinner with billionaires, not marches in the rain. And maybe that's why men in power adore her, because she's not a threat. She's an alibi, a living reminder that Japan doesn't need to change, because even its women now defend the system that broke them. If the Liberal Democratic Party were a factory, its most profitable product wouldn't be policies, it would be loyalty. Specifically, the kind of loyalty that looks patriotic, smells conservative, and never, ever questions the boss. And Takaichi? She's the deluxe model, fully assembled, perfectly polished, tested for obedience and media compatibility. The LDP doesn't promote women to empower them, it promotes them to display them, like rare trophies behind glass, proof that Japan is modern without ever being truly progressive. The process is genius in its simplicity. Step 1. Find a woman who doesn't complain. Step 2. Fund her, mentor her, protect her from scandal. Step 3. Use her existence as a counter-argument against every feminist who says Japan has a gender problem. When Takaichi talks about patriotism, men in suits nod approvingly. When she talks about women's rights, they cough politely and change the subject. But she never minds, because she knows her survival depends on never biting the hand that feeds her. In the LDP ecosystem, loyalty is currency, and independence is inflation. The moment you show too much of it, you're labeled difficult. And difficult women in Japanese politics don't get primetime interviews, they get quietly erased. So Takaichi plays her role perfectly. Her loyalty to the party outshines any loyalty to women. Her speeches echo male talking points so precisely that sometimes it feels like they were ghost-written by the same bureaucrat who designed the Ministry of Gender Equality's pamphlets. And it works. The media calls her strong, foreign journalists call her historic, and the LDP calls her useful. That's how the system manufactures loyalty, by turning ambition into dependency, by convincing women that their only path to power is through serving the men who already have it. In the end, Takaichi isn't proof that women can lead Japan. She's proof that Japan can absorb female leadership without ever changing a single rule. When Takaichi speaks, she doesn't inspire. She commands. Every word drips with a carefully crafted certainty, as if patriotism were not a choice, but a test of loyalty. She wraps nationalism in silk and sells it as virtue. And Japan, exhausted from decades of stagnation, buys it like a desperate country buys hope. Her message is simple: be proud of Japan. Sounds harmless, right? Except in her version, pride comes with fine print. To love Japan means to never criticize it. To be loyal means to be silent. And to be Japanese means to think exactly like she does. It's not patriotism. It's a performance of obedience dressed as love. And for Takaichi, it's also her shield, because when people question her lack of women's policies, she calls them unpatriotic. When journalists ask about gender inequality, she pivots to national unity. In her world, caring about women's rights is somehow a foreign idea, an imported virus that threatens Japanese values. This is how she wins. Not with logic, not with empathy, but with fear. Fear of being called disloyal, fear of being labeled anti-Japanese. And in a society obsessed with harmony, fear works better than policy ever could. Her version of patriotism isn't about love of country, it's about control of narrative. It's the same trick every authoritarian uses, turning devotion into discipline. You don't question Japan, you protect Japan from questions. And in that silence, inequality blooms quietly. Because while citizens are busy saluting flags, nobody notices the unpaid mothers, the overworked nurses, and the invisible women who keep the country alive. That's the irony of her leadership. She preaches national strength while ignoring the half of the nation most in need of it. Her politics of fear doesn't make Japan stronger. It just keeps everyone too afraid to admit how weak it's become. If patriarchy were a theatre production, Takaichi would be the star actress, performing male authority so flawlessly that even the men forget she's a woman. She's the dream come true for every conservative patriarch, a woman who defends the system that erased her. She doesn't challenge hierarchy, she embodies it. Her voice carries the authority of a general, her ideology the discipline of a soldier, and her smile, always just polite enough to remind you she's not here to comfort anyone. In meetings, she doesn't speak for women. She speaks like the men. In debates, she doesn't call out injustice. She calls for order. She's not breaking ceilings. She's enforcing them with better posture. Her very presence is the system's camouflage. Because when people complain about male domination, Japan can proudly reply, "How can that be? Our leader is a woman." A woman, yes, but one calibrated to never disturb the status quo. One who's learned that power in Japan isn't about what you change, it's about what you protect. Takaichi protects the myth that the nation is fair, that anyone, even a woman, can succeed if they just obey the rules long enough. Never mind that those rules were written before women could even sign property deeds. She wears femininity like ceremonial armor, impeccable hair, perfect suits, and a politeness so sharp it cuts through dissent. Behind that immaculate image is not empathy, but efficiency, the kind the bureaucracy loves and humanity fears. Because nothing frightens reformists more than a woman who proves the old system still works. Takaichi's Japan doesn't need female empowerment. It just needs female decoration, a mask to reassure the world that progress is happening, even when it isn't. And in that sense, she's the perfect modern leader for a country that wants to look progressive without ever becoming it. There's a special kind of tragedy in politics, not when villains win, but when idealists slowly become what they once opposed. Takaichi began as the symbol of possibility, a woman rising through the iron walls of Japanese power, a living rebuttal to the phrase, "Japan isn't ready for female leaders." But instead of rewriting the script, she started performing it better than anyone else. Somewhere between the press conferences and photo ops, she stopped being the exception and became the example. The evidence Japan's patriarchy needed to prove that feminism had gone too far. She doesn't shout at injustice anymore. She manages it. She doesn't break barriers. She enforces them politely, with budget committees, patriotic speeches, and a smile sharp enough to slice through accountability. Her greatest political victory was convincing Japan that gender doesn't matter anymore. Precisely so it never would. And that's how the system wins, not by suppressing women, but by promoting the ones who stopped resisting. The world looks at her and says, "See, a woman can become prime minister in Japan." But the women inside Japan whisper, "Yes, but at what cost?" Every nurse working a double shift, every mother fired after pregnancy, every woman told to understand her place. They're not seeing progress. They're seeing their reflection in a glass ceiling so polished they can no longer tell if it's glass or a mirror. Takaichi didn't just survive the system, she became the system. Efficient, emotionless, disciplined. The perfect bureaucratic machine with lipstick precision. And maybe that's the saddest part. Not that she betrayed other women, but that she convinced herself there was nothing left worth saving. Because when a woman stops fighting for women, she doesn't become stronger. She becomes the proof that the system no longer needs to fight back. Takaichi Sanae will go down in history as Japan's first female prime minister, but history will struggle to decide whether she was a symbol of progress or proof that progress can be faked. She will smile from the podium, flanked by men twice her age, while reporters use words like trailblazer, historic, and empowering. But behind every headline, there's a quieter story of women who still can't afford childcare, who still face harassment in silence, who still get told, "You should be grateful. Japan lets women work now." Takaichi didn't change Japan. She taught Japan how to pretend it changed, and that's the genius of her legacy. She didn't burn the system down. She air-conditioned it. She made patriarchy comfortable, palatable, even fashionable. Under her leadership, Japan didn't need to evolve because it could finally point to her and say, "Look, we did it. We're modern." But modernity without humanity is just efficiency, and equality without empathy is just propaganda. Her rise wasn't the end of sexism, it was its rebranding. Feminism replaced by discipline, equality replaced by duty, and individuality buried under national harmony. Takaichi didn't fail as a woman. She succeeded as a politician, which in Japan might be the same thing. Because here's the real irony. Every time a woman like her rises to the top without lifting others with her, the ladder doesn't get taller. It gets thinner. So yes, Japan has its female prime minister, but she governs a nation where most women still can't afford to dream. And maybe that's what scares the establishment the most, that one day Japan will get a female leader who actually wants to save women. And when that day comes, Takaichi's success story will finally be remembered for what it truly was, a warning. Now tell me in the comments, is Takaichi the face of progress or the mask that kept Japan asleep?